Hello everybody. Today we're going to be taking a look at my original track called Pistolero. We're going to be doing a full breakdown of all the synths, the instruments, the processes I used to create this track. If you want to listen to the original track first, which I highly suggest you do, there are links down in the description both for YouTube and for SoundCloud as well. So let's jump right into it. So we're in the mixer section here. So let's jump on over to the arrangement view here in Ableton Live. As you can see, it's not a very complex track here. Obviously, I've bust a few of the sections together just to keep them nice and neat and tidy. But there's only like 32 channels of audio in this track, which for modern dance music is not much at all. So we're going to start with the synthesizers and in particular the lead synth, which was the basis of this whole track, which we'll get into now. So if we take a look over here, just to the right of the screen, notice we have a deactivated clip, and this was the original clip that I used to start the whole project with. So if we just reactivate that, we can take a look at it in the MIDI editor here. Now, originally for this track, what I wanted to do was create something that was based around a very simple and basic melody that wasn't too exciting, but I could layer more sounds on top of and kind of make the whole track expand outwards from that. If you've listened to a track called Music Response by the Chemical Brothers, then you'll understand the concept. It starts off with this very cheap, simple sounding lead synth, but then opens up as the bass and the drums come in, and this was kind of what I wanted to do here. So if we take a listen to this original concept, you can hear where the whole idea of the track came from. As you can hear, it's very similar to what I used in the main part of the track. The main difference is the 16th notes that are playing the bass line down here. I originally put them in because I wanted to have this kind of arpeggiated feel about the melody, but ultimately I found that this actually worked really well with the actual sub bass in the track, which is also playing 16th notes. So what I actually did is copy this lead synth here completely and doubled it up onto the bass as the mid bass, and we'll get to that later, and that's not something I normally do, but it just happened to work, and that's part of music. Sometimes you have these little happy accidents, as Bob Ross would say, and they work in the track. So we'll deactivate this now and move on to the actual synth over here. And as you can see, it's pretty much the same. It's a very simple melody. If I zoom in there, you can see it's doubled up on the octave. So we see here we're playing the note of E and the note of C. On an octave down, it's playing the note of E and the note of C. And that's just really to make the melody sound a little bit thicker. So on its own, it just sounds like this. And if we go into the chain here and take a look how that was all built. So what I'll do is I'm going to turn off all the effects on this track, and we can break down how this particular synth was built. It's made using Serum, which is a very sort of popular synth at the moment. It's a wavetable synth, which means it uses audio files rather than an inbuilt oscillator to generate its sound. And as you can see, it's just two saw waves, which are playing it at slightly different octaves, once again to give that thicker sound. Just play a couple of notes. We also have a filtered envelope linked to the cutoff. So if you see here, when I play a note, the filter opens and shuts a little bit, and that's just to give that kind of a plucked sound to it. In the FX section, it's just a little bit of distortion to give it that sort of extra harmonics on the top end and a bit of ping pong delay. Okay, so we close this down. I then fed that through a saturator, which is another kind of distortion. It's to try and emulate the sort of extra harmonics you get using like analog gear, the hiss, the distortion, that type of thing, and that really helps sort of bring out the high end. You can hear it sounds much clearer and fatter. Then through an EQ just to roll off the bottom end so it's not interfering with the bass, and the shelf that really pushes those high end even more. Into a compressor just to keep everything under control. A utility which I'm using to widen the stereo field so it separates the sound more into your left and right headphones and just gives it that bigger sound. And finally here we have an Lfo tool, and you'll see me using this throughout the track. And what this is a type of side chain, and it's linked to the output volume on this particular track. And what it does is it cuts the volume out in this little LFO shape here on the first beat of it, within every 4 beats in every bar, and that allows the kick drum of this track to punch through the track and not have to fight against the transients of other synths and the bass, etc. And I almost forgot to mention the automation that we've used on this lead synth here. So if we open up the automation editor, you can see we have a number of parameters within the lead synth channel automated, particularly on Serum, which is the synthesizer we've used. And you can see that we've automated the this is the amp envelope here. That would be the filter envelope to cut off on the filter, and the unison detune. And if we go into Serum, this here is the unison detune, and unison is a type of voicing that's used in synthesizers, and what it does is whatever the waveform you're playing, in this case it's a sawtooth, it will duplicate it, in this case 3 times, and it will detune them slightly musically so that they're not playing exactly the same note. It's just very, very slightly out of tune, and it'll spread them out as well across the stereo spectrum, and this gives a much bigger, wider sound. You might have heard people talking about things like super saws or hyper saws when they're talking about music production, and that's what it is. So what I've done here is I've automated the detune, and that is how much each one of these 3 saws that are playing on this sound generator here are detuned from each other. And the higher the detune, the further and more out of tune each one gets, and it makes the sound very unstable, and it's a really cool effect. So if you see how that works here, you can see the automation here is raising the knob on Serum. That'll rise and it will make the sound more unstable. And let's just have a listen to what that sounds like. As you can see, it's a really cool effect. It's quite subtle, but in the context of the track, it really sort of adds that little bit of interest to that very simple melody that we've got there. On top of the lead sound, I've also layered a couple of pluck style synths made in a synthesizer called Spire. And what this does is it allows the lead synth to just punch through the main section of the track a bit more. So if I solo that for you, you can take a listen. And if we take a look at each one, specifically, they're just kind of variations of the same sort of theme. And as I said, that just allows that lead synth to punch through the track a little bit more. So we play them both together. And in context of the entire track. Next up we have one of my favourite parts of the track, and this is this little synth here called Synth. Um, and there's a reason it's called Stranger Synth. If we just turn off some of the effects that we have plugged into this, and we'll break down exactly how it was made and sound design choice. So without any effects on, it just kind of sounds like this. Let's listen to this part. If you've ever seen the show Stranger Things, it's got this really cool sort of 80s themed vaporwave synth intro, and I wanted to create something similar sounding to that, so we created this patch in Serum, which is a couple of super saws with some filter on the envelope and some basic compression and hyperdimension on the effects, and it creates this slightly plucked sound saw synth. And then we've added all these effects to just really sort of give it that sort of space in the mix. So we added some delay, some reverb, EQ to remove some of the bottom end and just give it a bit of a boost up at the top, a compressor to keep everything kind of under control, and an auto pan just to sort of bounce it from speaker to speaker. And if you listen to what it sounds like with all effects on, interesting thing about this as well is it's not actually programmed in as an arpeggiation. As you can see, it's just chords being played, and I used a arpeggiator here to give it that stepped arpeggiated feeling. I was only going to use this as a placeholder. I was just bashing out ideas and coming up with different variations, and in the end I just thought this sounded really good. It worked with the track, so it stayed. Next up, we're going to take a look at the pads and the strings used in this track. And the core of this is based around a patch made in a synth called Diva by Yuhi. And we're just going to take off all the effects that are linked onto this just so we can hear it as it sounds. I really like this, and this is actually a preset patch in Diva called Deep Space 1. I was just browsing through, I was looking for a pad or string sound that worked in this track, and I found this, and I just thought this sounded amazing. So I'm just going to let you listen to how this sounds on its own with no effects. Sounds so nice, so deep, and it's got that real sort of analog warmth to it. Unfortunately, as it stood, it was a little bit too much. If we look at the EQ when it's playing, you see all that information in the bottom end there was just absolutely overpowering the track. You couldn't hear anything else. It sounded too muddy, so we had to dial a lot of that back and make the sound a lot thinner, but whilst maintaining the character. Added a little bit of reverb and utility just to boost the volume that we've lost from all the EQ reduction here. That sounds really nice. The chords themselves are based upon the melody that I started with the lead melody. Next up, we have the sort of string ensemble sound here. There's actually two parts to this. We're just going to play this, the main part you can hear. Obviously, lots of reverb on that, a bit of delay just to give it more stereo width. Some EQs to take out the bottom end, and a utility which is used to widen the sound between both speakers. Now I thought that sounded a little bit too vanilla. It sounded, it sounded like a patch from a synthesizer. So I wanted something to just give it a little bit more interest, a little bit more ear candy. So we added this Spire Synth here, which, as you can see, we've got an Lfo tool here, which is a Max for Live device actually, and that's automating this little notch on the filter. Okay, so without that, if we disable this, we can take a listen to what this sounds like. It's just a basic super saw. Once again, made in Spire. And we've got lots of reverb on there just to widen the sound. But if we turn on the EQ, and you can see that this LFO here is controlling this particular frequency on the EQ spectrum and just sort of bouncing this notch across the mids to the highs, and that gives it this type of sound. It gives it that really cool sort of phased sound. I mean, I could have achieved a similar sound by using a phaser, but I just really like this. It was really subtle, and when you combine it with the string ensemble pad, you get this kind of bigger, sort of wider sound. And then just here on the breakdown, we have this final part, which is just a drone. This is, once again, it's just Spire playing a super saw style sound, no effects or anything on there. And this is just playing kind of bass notes as a drone, really low down on the octaves, and that's just to really thicken up the sound during the breakdown. Altogether, when you listen to it all in context, it sounds like this. You see, I've bust them all into one channel here, and on here we have an auto filter, a saturator, which I'll turn back on, and of course Lfo Tool, so that's just for when the main beat is playing, it ducks the strings out of the way of the kick drum. Saturation just adds those extra harmonics in the top end. It's really subtle, but it does add that little extra bit at the top. And the auto filter here is a little effect I believe we use a little further along on the breakdown. Here, what we've done is we've used a low pass filter at the very large resonant notch at the top, and as the end of the breakdown comes, we get this sweep of the filter starting high and going down to the low mids, and that notch on the resonance gives it a really cool effect. So we'll have a listen to that here. Yeah, let's take a look at the bass line now. Now, as we talked about when we discussed the lead, we actually copied the lead sound as part of the mid bass here. We take a listen to that here. You can hear and you can see that it is the exact same setup as our lead synth. So if we actually solo them both together, and you can see how it works. It was a complete accident that it turned out like this, but you know, sometimes that's just how music goes. You work on different ideas and you go to create one sound, and sometimes you stumble across something and it works for your track, and that's just the case here. The sub end of the bass here, really simple. It is just an analog model synth here, playing a sawtooth with a lot of the top end filtered out, as you can see here. We've added a boost to the low end there just to give that bass a little bit more oomph. Once again, a utility just to mono the bass sounds, and that's sounds like this. A little bit of an envelope on the filter as well, which gives that kind of plucked sound. Obviously, once again, these are bussed together through a singular channel with an auto filter. That's again for an effect, a high pass effect, which I'll come on to as we discuss the layout of the track, and of course an Lfo Tool as well. So together, sound like that. So now if we go and take a look at the percussion, we start with the kick drum. And this is a kick drum I've used quite a few times actually, from the Dave Parkinson Trance Essentials pack. I think I used this on my Everything Right Where It Belongs remix, my remix of Enjoy the Silence as well. I think I used this kick in it. It's a really good sounding kick drum. A nice punch to it, a really nice low end. A little bit of processing to it here on the EQ. Just to take out this, there was like a little kind of a knock, sort of a low mid knock that was bleeding through here. I didn't like, so I've cut that out. Boosted the mids up a little bit and taken a little bit of the top end off, which just sort of rounds off the click, the punchy end of the kick off. So then going through a compressor, a pretty slow, fast attack, with a really fast release, and that allows the initial transient to punch through before closing the compressor. It just makes the kick sound punchier. So if I'll give you a little A and B to that. There is a little bit of distortion coming through that, but it's not a big deal. I think it adds a bit of character to the kick, actually. Once again, another high pass filter, same as the bass, to create an effect, and we'll get into that now, actually. So if I find out where our auto filter is, and you can see that on the bass master bus, the kick bus, we have this automation effect here, which is linked to a high pass auto filter. What that does is it cuts off the bottom end of the sub of the kick drum, so we only have the high end to create a kind of effect, and it's what we call a transition effect. It allows you to move from one section of a track to another and build tension, and it also gives impact to so the next bar of the track. So if we have a listen to how that sounds. And the same with the bass, and if we solo them both together, you can hear the type of impact it has when the bass and the kick come back in. So next up, let's talk about the percussion. Once again, it's pretty simple. There's nothing too complex going on here, and most of it's based around this loop here, which I got from Loop Cloud. So if we open this up here, and you might recognize this straight away, actually. This kind of gave us the whole foundation of the percussion, and I've really not done much to it. It sounded good as it was. I liked the little synth toms in there. Loved the shaker loop on the top as well. The only thing I've done is I've knocked it up a couple of semitones just so it was in tune with the rest of the track, and just taken a little bit of the bottom end off so it's not interfering with the sub bass, and a little boost on the highs just to get that shaker to come through the track. It just, it's got a really cool vibe to it. We've layered that here, as you can see, with a closed hat. I really should have put these in order, but you know, that's my messy workload really. And this is just a basic hi-hat, closed hi-hat sound. If we just take a listen. And what I've done is added some groove to it, swing. And what this does is it just kind of offsets the sample a little bit, knocks it a little bit out of time, changes the velocity, and that's just to make it sound a little bit more human and a little less robotic. If you listen to how it sounds, and here it's got a little bit of a swing to it. If we take off the swing, you can hear it sounds really robotic. And then if we A-B it again, and that was just to give the track some consistency, so it sort of worked with our shaker loop up here as well. So we listen to them both together. Next up, we've just got a basic open 909 hi-hat here. Oh, that's the wrong one. Which has nearly all the bottom and mids taken out. We already had this kind of area covered in the percussion by our loop here, so I just wanted the kind of the really ultra high end as our offbeat hat. Next up, the clap. Once again, just really simple, a really basic one-shot sound with all the bottom end taken out. Here, as you can see, a little bit of a notch upwards on the EQ and the high just to bring out that sort of nice little click at the top end. And we've also added this orbit, which is a transient designer. It allows you to make the initial hit of the clap punch through a little bit more. So we listen to it with and without. This is it without. And then with, you see it just makes it punch through the mix a little bit more. Then into some reverb, which is just a little bit of a room reverb, just to give it a little bit of space and make it sound less synthesized. You can see it really sort of brings that sound to life a bit. Next up, this is probably one of the most controversial parts of the track. Is the rides. I'm going to solo both of them, and a lot of people, some people either really like this bit or really hate it. I've had a lot of conflicting arguments on both sides. I really like them myself. Now, the crazy thing is that the initial sound isn't actually a ride. It's a hi-hat. So we take all the effects off and just play dry. And I've fed that through a resonator here, and that's what gives it that kind of resonant ride cymbal kind of sound. I was just playing around with different effects on normal overused percussion, and I just wanted to create something that sounded a bit unique and a bit different, and this is what we came up with. Almost like a bell as well. And that's sort of looped up with this ride cymbal, which is a ride, which I've cut most of the initial transient out and just left the tail. So we have this sound through a lot of delay as well, and reverb. Now what you'll notice is that both of them have an auto pan, which pans the volume from each from left to right. And if you look at the offset with each one, turn these back on, you'll see they're slightly different. So when the resonance 909 is playing through the left speaker, the ride cymbal will be playing through the right, and that's just a little bit of ear candy. So if you're listening with headphones now, you should be able to hear them bounce from the left and right speaker. And just to finish off the percussion, just some really basic snare roll here, nothing too special about this. And a crash cymbal down here, which I've also reversed. So if we solo this. Now you'll notice that some of the percussion has been bussed into this one channel here. And that's sort of added a exciter, which is a type of saturator, which just adds more upper harmonics, gives it a bit more grit and dirt. And I've also added a glue compressor just to keep all of those sort of particularly the high end sort of hi-hats and cymbals all together. So if we take a listen to just the percussion, and we A-B the exciter, you can hear it just gives it that little bit of extra buzz on the top end. So, and this is what all of our percussion sounds like together. Really good groove to that then, really, considering how simple it is, I'm really happy with how that turned out. So finally, for the final part of the track, we're going to take a look at the effects here, the sound effects. Once again, nothing too over the top. So we have this, which is a serum once again, and as you can see, I've disabled both the oscillators and we're just using this noise generator here. And it's going through a flanger, a compressor and a reverb. And we have some automation, I believe, yeah, on the filter cutoff. So what happens if you put a white noise through a filter, you get that really traditional, what's called an uplifter or a sweep in dance music. So if you listen, as you can see the filter opening, you'll hear the white noise coming back in. And obviously as it sweeps down, it's a really great, tried and tested sound effect. Next up we have just a load of just different samples that I've brought in. I believe this one, some sort of, this looks like something I've bounced out of audio myself actually. Let's have a listen. Yeah, this was a variation of this serum here, which I've added that Lfo Tool again to give it that pumping sort of sound effect to it, and then bounced it out as audio and used it as an effect here. And the rest here are just like various effects. There's some more reverse white noise sounds. Some sort of impacts, which are like kick drums that have reverb layered on them. I think there's a few variants of this here for different sound effects. And another one at the bottom here. course, the most important one, and this effect is a bit of a motif in this track actually, is the clap here, which sounds like this. Thinking back, I really should have put this up with the percussion because it is more of a percussive element than an effect. But it is basically another Max for Live device. It's the clap device. It just allows you to make these dance music style claps. You can edit them, and I've come up with this sound, which, as you can tell, has got a ridiculous amount of reverb and delay. I've used the Valhalla Vintage Verb once again, my favourite reverb, a huge 8.5 second decay on there. The Echo, which is another Ableton device, it's like a dub delay style multi-effects unit. And I believe we've activated the filter on this as well, yes, you can see. A bit of an EQ just to take the bottom ends out, give it a really high shelf boost, and a compressor just to keep it all under control. So that's it, that's my track Pistolero. That's all the different parts, how it was built. Overall, not a very complicated track, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. I think I'll do another video soon to show off the Acid for Breakfast mix, which is basically the same track with just new percussion and an acid line, but we'll get into that a bit later. So thanks for watching, hope you've enjoyed. Fire any questions in the description and I'll try and answer them as soon as possible. Cheers.